The obsidian rotunda of the High Synod did not merely house the government of the Ethon hegemony. It was designed to crush the spirit of any who entered with the sheer weight of its history. Walls of polished volcanic glass, extracted from the dead core of the hegemony's homeworld, stretched upward into the gloom, spiraling like the interior of a massive shell until they met the transparent dome far above, where the light of the binary stars filtered down in hues of bruised purple and angry crimson. The air was kept intentionally thin, a reminder that only the strong deserved to breathe in the presence of the High Council, and the silence that hung between the pillars was not one of peace, but of predatory anticipation. In the center of the vast, circular floor, the holographic strategic map hummed with a low, malevolent thrumming sound, casting the faces of the counselors in the pale, ghostly light of 1,000 conquered star systems. There were no chairs here. The rulers of the Ethon stood, for to sit was to show weakness, and weakness was a capital offense in the eyes of the hegemony. High Exarch Valdor, a being of immense stature whose chitinous armor had been grafted directly onto his carapace in a ritual of blood and metal, dominated the room. His mandibles clicked in a rhythm of agitation that sent tremors through the sensory tendrils of the lesser counselors. He stared into the holographic display, his compound eyes fracturing the image of the border territories into thousands of sharp, analyzing facets. The subject of the day's conclave was not trade, nor was it the suppression of the slave castes, for those were trivialities handled by the lower bureaucrats. Today, the Synod had gathered to discuss the final eradication of the Scythian enclave, a pacifist species that had the misfortune of occupying a star system rich in rare isotopes, isotopes the hegemony required to fuel the next expansion of their armada. The Scythians had pleaded for mercy, they had offered trade, they had offered submission, but the hegemony did not want subjects. It wanted resources, and it wanted the efficiency of a silent graveyard. "The fleet is positioned," Valdor intoned, his voice a grinding tectonic rumble that seemed to emanate from the floor itself rather than his throat. "The Grand Armada waits only for the final command. The Scythian atmospheric shields are degraded. Their orbital defenses are non-existent. We will glass the planet within the cycle, and the mining barges will descend before the crust has cooled." He swept a massive, clawed hand through the hologram, scattering the motes of light that represented the defenseless Scythian world. "It is a mercy. We end their fear by ending their existence." To his right, standing slightly behind the circle of command as befitted his station, was Archivist Alara. Unlike Valdor, Alara was of the Krell lineage, a species integrated into the hegemony centuries ago for their intellect and psychic sensitivity. He was slender, with pale, translucent skin that showed the pulsing of blue veins beneath, and his large, dark eyes held a depth of sorrow that he kept carefully hidden behind a mask of cold logic. Alara did not share the Exarch's bloodlust, but he knew better than to voice dissent. His role was to advise, to calculate, and to record the glories of the Empire. Yet, as he looked at the tactical display, something gnawed at the edge of his consciousness, a subtle wrongness in the data streams flowing from the long-range sensors in the Scythian sector. "Exarch," Alara spoke softly, his voice like the rustling of dry parchment. "The calculations for the orbital bombardment are flawless, as always. However, the deep void sensors have picked up an anomaly on the periphery of the Scythian system. A signal. It does not match the frequency of the Scythian communication arrays, nor does it correspond to any known pirate clan or rival empire." Valdor paused, his head tilting slowly as he regarded the archivist with a mixture of contempt and boredom. "An anomaly? Space is full of noise, archivist. Solar flares, magnetic eddies, the dying gasps of stars. Do not waste the Synod's time with ghost stories when we are on the verge of a harvest." "It is not a natural phenomenon, Exarch," Alara persisted, tapping a sequence into his data slate, transferring the reading to the central hologram. A single blinking red dot appeared at the very edge of the Scythian system, vastly distant from the gathering might of the Ethon Armada. "It is a vessel, a single vessel. It arrived via a method of translation we cannot identify. There was no hyperspace tier, no warp signature. It simply was not there, and then it was." The other counselors, armored warlords and robed overseers representing the dozen species crushed under the Ethon heel, leaned in. A ripple of murmurs went through the chamber, not of fear but of mockery. The scale of the Ethon Armada was legendary. The fleet currently surrounding the Scythian world was large enough to block out the suns of that system, a sea of dreadnoughts, carriers, and annihilation cruisers that stretched for light seconds. Against such a tide, a single vessel was less than a speck of dust. "Show me," Valdor commanded. Holograms zoomed in, magnifying the anomaly millions of times until the grainy resolution cleared. The vessel that appeared was disappointing in every regard. It was a blocky utilitarian construct, shaped like a long, rectangular prism with no elegant curves, no intimidating spikes, and no visible weapon ports. It was colored a dull, matte gray, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. It looked less like a warship and more like a primitive hauling container left adrift in the void. There were no glowing engine nacelles, no shimmering shield bubbles. It hung in space, inert, silent, and aggressively unimpressive. Laughter, harsh and guttural, erupted from General Kruk, a beast of a creature who commanded the vanguard. This is the anomaly. It looks like refuse jettisoned from a mining scow. It is likely a derelict, drifting from some failed civilization long dead. Alara narrowed his eyes, studying the telemetry. It is not drifting, General. It is maintaining a perfect geostationary hold relative to the Scythian homeworld, despite being outside the system's gravity well. It is under power, though I cannot detect the emission source. And the hull composition. The scanners cannot penetrate it. It reads as a void in the data. Valdor waved a dismissal hand. It is of no consequence. If it is a ship, it belongs to scavengers or fools. If it is debris, we will vaporize it along with the rest of the system. Does it hail us? It has been broadcasting a wideband transmission on all open frequencies since it arrived, Alara noted. Audio only, no visual. Play it, Valdor ordered, expecting a plea for mercy or a desperate warning from some pirate lord. The room fell silent as the audio feed was patched through the obsidian rotunda's speakers. The voice that emerged was not the screeching of a warrior or the synthesized drone of a machine. It was a biological voice, low, calm, and carrying a strange, weary texture. It spoke the trade tongue of the galaxy with a precision that felt academic, devoid of any accent. This is the Terran vessel Weight of Conscience, the voice said. You have entered a system under the protection of the Terran Union. Your fleet is targeting a civilian population. This is a violation of the Galactic Sentience Rights Accord. You are ordered to power down your weapons and withdraw your forces immediately. We do not wish to engage, but we will not permit the destruction of this species. You have 10 standard minutes to comply. This is your only warning. The silence that followed the message lasted only a heartbeat before it was shattered by the roaring laughter of the High Synod. Valdor threw his head back, his mandibles clicking rapidly in amusement. The sheer audacity, the impossible arrogance of a single, ugly ship commanding the Ethon hegemony to retreat, was the most absurd joke he had heard in cycles. Terran, General Kruk wheezed, wiping a tear from his secondary eyes. I have heard rumors of such a species. Hairless bipeds from the outer rim, soft-skinned, short-lived. They are barely spacefaring, and they send one box to threaten the Grand Armada. Valdor's amusement faded into a cold, predatory sneer. The insult was amusing, but it was still an insult, and the Ethon hegemony did not suffer insults. They claim protection over the Scythians, then they shall share their fate. Archivist, relay a command to the fleet admiral. Ignore the vessel, proceed with the bombardment. If the Weight of Conscience attempts to interfere, assign a single frigate to dissect it. I want the crew taken alive. I wish to see what these Terrans look like when they are flayed. Alara felt a chill wind blow through his soul. The voice on the recording, it had been too calm. There was no tremor of fear, no bravado of a warrior trying to mask his terror. It was the voice of a being stating a fact, like a teacher correcting a student. Exarch, Alara ventured. Perhaps we should scan them again? The energy density of their hull is. Silence, Archivist, Valdor roared, striking the obsidian pillar beside him, cracking the stone. You speak of caution when we are the apex. You fear a floating brick. The order is given. Watch the screen. Witness the might of the Ethon. The view on the hologram shifted back to the tactical overview. The Grand Armada, a swarm of predatory shapes, began to light up as their main plasma batteries charged. The energy signatures were blinding, a testament to the power that had enslaved a sector. In the path of this cosmic hurricane sat the tiny, gray rectangle of the human ship, motionless. The countdown began. On the bridge of the Ethon flagship, the devourer of light, Fleet Admiral Zalcor watched the human vessel on his main view screen with a look of supreme boredom. He had commanded the destruction of 12 civilizations. This was merely paperwork. Target the planet, he ordered his gunnery crews. Primary ignition in sequence. Ignore the debris on the flank. Let the escort frigate Razor's Edge handle the Terran nuisance. From the formation of the massive fleet, a sleek dagger-shaped frigate peeled away. The Razor's Edge was fast, armed with plasma lances capable of slicing through city shields. It accelerated toward the weight of conscience, closing the distance in seconds. "They are hailing us again, Admiral," the communications officer reported, sounding amused. "They say, please do not do this. We do not want to hurt you." Zalcor chuckled. "Fire." The razor's edge unleashed a torrent of green plasma fire, a barrage that would have vaporized a cruiser. The beam struck the weight of conscience dead center. The counselors in the obsidian rotunda watched, expecting the gray box to dissolve into molten slag. But when the plasma dissipated, the human ship was still there. It hadn't moved. It hadn't raised a shield. The hull was not glowing. There was no scorch mark. It was as if the plasma had simply ceased to exist the moment it touched the gray metal. "Did they miss?" Valdor growled. "Direct hit confirmed," Ilara whispered, his hands flying over his console. "Exarch, the energy was absorbed, 100% absorption, no thermal bloom, no kinetic transfer." On the screen, the weight of conscience hailed the attacking frigate. "Warning shots acknowledged. Please withdraw. You have 8 minutes." "Insolence," Zalcor shouted on the bridge of the flagship. "All ships in the vanguard, target that vessel, vaporize it." The discipline of the fleet held, but the confusion was palpable. 50 warships, destroyers, and cruisers shifted their aim from the planet to the lone human ship. The space between them lit up with the fury of 1,000 suns. Missiles, lasers, particle beams, and antimatter shells rained down upon the weight of conscience in a saturation bombardment that would have cracked the crust of a moon. The sheer brightness of the assault blinded the sensors of the High Synod. For a full minute, the human ship was the center of a chaotic storm of destruction. Valdor nodded, satisfied. "Dust, it is dust now." The energy dissipated slowly. The interference cleared. The weight of conscience drifted forward, perhaps a few hundred meters closer. It was pristine, not a scratch. The gray paint was unblemished. "Impossible," General Kruk breathed. "Shields, what shields can withstand that?" "There are no shields," Ilara said, his voice trembling. "The sensors detect no field. The matter of the projectiles simply vanished upon contact. Exarch, this technology, it defies the laws of physics as we understand them. We must reconsider." "No," Valdor slammed his fist down. "It is a trick, a holographic projection. The real ship is cloaked elsewhere. Order the entire fleet to fire, the entire armada. Burn the sector if you must." On the flagship, Admiral Zalcor was beginning to feel the first stirrings of true fear. But his orders were absolute. He keyed the fleet-wide comms. "All units, coordinate fire, maximum yield, target the anomaly, fire." Thousands of ships fired. The void boiled. The energy output was measurable in neighboring systems. It was a display of force that represented the industrial output of the entire hegemony for a decade, expended in seconds. Inside the weight of conscience, Captain Elias Thorne sat in a comfortable, worn leather chair, sipping a cup of synthetic tea. The bridge was small, clean, and utterly silent. There were no flashing lights, no screaming alarms. The view screen showed the wall of fire crashing against their hull, but the ship didn't even shudder. "External energy levels peaking," his tactical officer, a woman named Sarah, said calmly. She didn't look up from her book. "They're really trying, sir." Thorne sighed, setting his tea down. He looked tired. He hated this part. He always hated this part. "They always do. Why can't they ever just listen? Is the localized causal rejection field holding?" "Stable at 0.04% capacity," Sarah replied. "The hull isn't even warm." "Time remaining. 1 minute until the deadline." Thorne tapped the arm of his chair. "Open a channel. One last time. Let's try to save them from themselves." The channel opened. Thorne's face appeared on the giant hologram in the obsidian rotunda, dwarfing the Ethon warlords. He looked small, fragile, and sad. "High Council of the Ethon," Thorne said, his eyes meeting Valdor's across the light years. "You are expending resources you cannot afford to waste. You are attacking a vessel that exists partially outside of your dimension. You cannot harm us. Please, stand down. If you fire again after the deadline, we will be forced to neutralize the threat. We do not kill unless necessary, but we will remove your ability to wage war. You have 10 seconds. "You dare threaten the hegemony?" Valdor screamed, his pride overriding his survival instinct. "We are the masters of the void. Die, you hairless ape, die." The deadline hit 0. Thorne closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Engagement authorized. Execute protocol. Silence." On the screen, the weight of conscience did not fire a giant laser. It did not launch a swarm of missiles. Instead, a low, resonant tone was broadcast across all frequencies, a sound that was felt in the bones of every Ethon sailor. Then the weight of conscience pulsed. It was a single ripple of distortion, expanding outward in a sphere, moving faster than light, passing through the Ethon fleet like a ghost. What was that? Valdor demanded. A sensor pulse they missed. Alara was staring at his console, his face draining of blood until he was nearly transparent. Exarch, the telemetry, the ships. What speak? They are coming apart. On the battlefield, the horror began. It was not an explosion. It was an unwinding. The massive dreadnoughts of the Ethon Armada, forged from hyperalloy and neutron star matter, simply began to disassemble. The molecular bonds holding the hulls together were cancelled. Ships didn't explode, they dissolved. One moment, the Devourer of Light was a terrifying fortress of war. The next, it was a cloud of component atoms drifting apart like smoke in a breeze. The effect spread instantly through the fleet. Weapons systems vanished. Engines turned into fine dust. Armor plating evaporated. But the crew remained. Thousands upon thousands of Ethon warriors found themselves floating in the vacuum, protected by their emergency suits, which curiously had not been dissolved, surrounded by the glittering dust of what used to be their invincible fleet. The humans had stripped them of their ships, their weapons, their very clothes in some cases, leaving them naked and drifting in the dark, utterly unharmed but completely helpless. In under 10 minutes, the greatest armada in the sector's history had been converted into a nebulae of iron filings and silicon dust. The silence in the obsidian rotunda was absolute. It was a silence heavier than the volcanic walls. Valdor stared at the screen, his mind unable to comprehend the visual data. The fleet was gone, not defeated, erased. And yet the life sign sensors showed millions of survivors drifting in the wreckage, alive, screaming in confusion. The human ship, the weight of conscience, sat amidst the glittering cloud, untouched. Thorn's face reappeared on the hologram. He looked even sadder now. We have disassembled your fleet. The molecular binding negation field was tuned specifically to non-biological refined metals. Your crews are safe. We have already dispatched rescue drones to tow them to the planet's surface. They will be prisoners of war of the Scythian people until a treaty is signed. Valdor slumped against the pillar. His world was shattering. Magic, he whispered. Sorcery. Physics, Thorn corrected gently. Physics you have not yet discovered because you spent all your time building better ways to kill, rather than better ways to understand the universe. You thought power came from the size of the gun. Power comes from understanding the nature of reality. Alara stepped forward, his fear replaced by a burning, desperate curiosity. Who are you, truly? Thorn looked at the archivist, and for the first time a small smile touched his lips. We are the Terran Union. We were once like you, violent, arrogant. We fought wars over dirt and ideology. We nearly destroyed ourselves. But we looked up and we realized the universe is too big and too dark for us to be fighting each other. We grew up. We are here to help you grow up too. You destroyed our fleet to teach us a lesson, Valdor hissed, trying to regain some shred of dignity. No, Thorn said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious, heavy as a black hole. We destroyed your fleet because we needed your attention, and because we needed you disarmed. For what? Alara asked. To conquer us? To save you, Thorn replied. You ignored the human vessel, but you also ignored the sensors we placed in the outer dark. The reason we are in this sector, the reason we are protecting the Scythians is not just ethics. It is logistics. The hologram changed. The view of the Scythian system zoomed out, pulling back further and further past the borders of the Ethon hegemony, past the spiral arm of the galaxy into the deep intergalactic void. There, moving against the backdrop of distant galaxies, was a shadow. It was not a ship. It was not a fleet. It was a biological mass, a swarm of chitin and hunger that spanned light years, a hive mind of cosmic proportions moving toward the galaxy. The Typhon swarm, Thorn said. It consumes entire star clusters. It will be here in 3 standard years. The Scythian system is the only choke point where the hyperspace lanes converge. It is the only place we can build the barrier. The counselors stared at the shadow. It was death. Absolute, inevitable death. Compared to this, their fleet, their wars, their conquests were the bickering of insects beneath a boot. We needed your fleet gone, Thorn explained, because we need your metal. The dust of your ships, it is the raw material we need to build the containment wall. And we need your crews, not as slaves, but as soldiers, real soldiers, fighting for survival, not conquest. Thorn leaned forward. You thought you were the apex predators. You are not. You are lunch, but we are the gardeners, and we do not let the weeds choke the garden. The connection ended. The weight of conscience began to move, its collection fields activating, gathering the dust of the destroyed armada to begin the construction of the Great Shield. In the obsidian rotunda, the silence stretched on. Valdor looked at his hands, the claws that had torn enemies apart. They felt small, useless. Ilara was the first to speak. He walked to the center of the room, looking at the shadow in the dark. He looked at Valdor. The old law is dead, Ilara said, his voice ringing with a new authority. The wars of conquest are over. We have a new enemy, and it seems we have a new teacher. Valdor looked at the archivist, then at the empty space where his fleet used to be. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving only the cold clarity of the survivor. He straightened up, not as a conqueror, but as a warrior facing a true threat for the first time. Open a channel to the Terran vessel, Valdor commanded, his voice quiet but steady. Ask them where they need the metal. The cinematic view pulled back from the tower, from the planet, rising through the swirling nebula of the disassembled fleet, past the silent, brick-like human ship, and out into the vast, starry expanse, where the shadow approached, and where a single, tiny human ship stood as the first line of defense, ready to turn enemies into allies in the face of the encroaching night. The aftermath of the 10-minute war, as history would come to call it, was not a period of chaos, but one of terrifying, structured reorganization. The Ethon hegemony did not collapse. It froze. The shock of seeing their ultimate sanction, the Grand Armada, turned into construction materials in the span of a coffee break had shattered the chaotic political infighting of the High Synod. There were no coups, no rebellions, because everyone was too busy looking up at the sky in existential dread. Captain Elias Thorn did not leave the bridge of the weight of conscience for 3 days. The diplomatic channels were flooded, not just from the Ethon, but from the Scythians, who were understandably confused as to why their would-be executioners were now floating naked in space, while a gray brick vacuumed up their ships. Captain, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the haze of Thorn's fatigue. We have a shuttle approaching. It's Ethon design, diplomatic codes, it's High Exarch Valdor himself, and the archivist. Thorn rubbed his temples. They want to negotiate terms, or maybe Valdor wants to try and punch me. Let them in. Docking Bay 1. Full bioscan, but no guards. I don't want them to think we're afraid. We're not afraid, sir. Sarah were terrified, just not of them. When Valdor and Ilara stepped onto the deck of the human ship, the contrast was jarring. The aliens were ornate, covered in etched armor and flowing robes, looming nearly 8 feet tall. The human ship's interior was stark, industrial, and cramped. The air smelled of recycled ozone and coffee. There were no statues of leaders, no gold leaf, just pipes, conduits, and screens displaying complex mathematical topological manifolds. Thorn met them in the cargo bay. He wore a simple jumpsuit with a small patch of the Terran Union, a hand holding a star. He looked small compared to Valdor. Valdor looked around, his compound eyes twitching. This is the vessel that defeated us. It is a warehouse. It's a functional engineering tug with a Class 9 reality sink installed in the cargo hold, Thorn said, offering a hand in the human gesture of greeting. Valdor hesitated, then confusedly mimicked the gesture, his massive claw enveloping Thorn's hand. We don't build warships like you do, Exarch. We don't build ships to look scary. We build them to work. Ilara stepped forward, his gaze intense. The reality sink, that is the weapon. It's not a weapon, Thorn corrected. It's a mining tool. We use it to dismantle asteroids for terraforming projects. We just recalibrated the frequency to match your hull alloys. I apologize for the nudity of your crews. It was difficult to isolate the biomatter signatures quickly. Valdor made a sound that might have been a choke. A mining tool? You defeated the Grand Armada with a mining tool. Technically, yes, if we had used a warship, you wouldn't be here. Thorn gestured down the hall. Come, we have much to discuss. The Typhon swarm is accelerating. They walked through the ship. As they passed the engineering bay, the aliens saw humans working, not soldiers, but engineers, scientists, some looking barely old enough to be adults. They were calm, focused. There was no military drilling. It was a culture of competence, not dominance. In the ship's small mess hall, Thorn laid out the data. He projected a map of the galaxy. The Terran Union has been tracking the swarm for a century, Thorn explained. We are not a large empire, we control only a few dozen systems, but we are very old in terms of technology. We found ruins of the precursors, the ones who built the gates. We learned that the galaxy operates on cycles. The swarm is the cleaning crew. It comes every 50,000 years to eat the civilizations that get too loud. Too loud, Ilera asked. Civilizations that use crude energy. Fission, fusion, antimatter. The swarm feeds on high-energy emissions. The Ethon hegemony, you light up the dark like a bonfire, you're attracting them. Valdor sank into a chair that groaned under his weight. Our strength is our doom. Your type of strength is your doom, Thorn said. You build bigger fires. We learn to build cold fires, zero-point energy, dimensional shifting, technology that doesn't scream into the void. That's why you couldn't detect us until we hailed you. We don't emit. And the wall, Valdor asked. You spoke of a wall. A Dyson shell, Thorn said. Partial, we are going to shroud the Scythian star. We need to hide the energy signature of this sector. If we can mask the heat, the swarm might bypass us. But we need mass, lots of it. Your fleet was convenient, but we need more. We need your industry. We need your mining barges. We need your people to stop building guns and start building shielding panels. We need to cover the sun. The scope of the project was staggering. To enclose a star, it was the work of gods. And if we refuse, Valdor asked, the old warlord instincts flaring one last time. If we rebuild our fleet and attack you? Thorn looked at him with that same profound sadness. Valdor, I have one ship here. The Union has 5, total. We are not conquerors. We are tired. If you attack us, we will just leave. We will phase shift away, and we will let the swarm eat you. We intervene because we believe all sapient life has value, even yours, but we won't die for you if you insist on suicide. The silence hung heavy in the mess hall. Alara looked at his exarch. He speaks the truth, Valdor. I can feel it. The logic is sound. The threat is real. And looking at what they did to the fleet, do we really want to gamble that they don't have a warship somewhere? Valdor looked at the human. He saw no deception, just a weary man trying to save a galaxy that didn't know it was in danger. The hegemony is over, Valdor muttered. If we do this, if we turn our swords into shields, we are no longer the Ethon warriors. No, Thorn said firmly. You will be the Ethon guardians. It's a harder job. It's easy to destroy. It's very hard to protect. Are you strong enough for that, exarch? It was a challenge, a psychological strike perfectly aimed at the Ethon pride. Valdor stood up. He drew himself to his full height. His mandibles clicked, not in agitation, but in resolve. The Ethon do not fail, Valdor proclaimed. If the task is to cage a star, we will cage the star. If the task is to fight the dark, we will break the dark. We will provide the metal. We will provide the labor. He paused. But you, human, you will provide the knowledge, and you will teach us how to make the reality sink. Thorn smiled. One step at a time, exarch. First, let's get your sailors some pants. The months that followed were a blur of impossible activity. The 10-minute war had changed everything. The Ethon hegemony, once a terror, transformed into a frantic industrial machine. The Scythians, initially terrified, became the architects, their natural affinity for crystalline structures proving vital for the Dyson panels. The weight of conscience remained at the center of it all. The gray brick became a symbol, not of fear but of unity. But the twist, the true depth of the human strategy, was yet to be revealed. 6 months into the construction, the Typhon swarm's vanguard arrived. They were bioships, leviathans the size of moons, fleshy and grotesque, spewing acid and void spores. The Ethon fleet, now rebuilt not with plasma cannons but with Terran-designed gravity projectors, met them. Valdor led the charge, his ship the Redemption utilizing a localized gravity shear to crush the bioships. It was a brutal, ugly fight. The Ethon fought with a ferocity that stunned the humans. They didn't retreat. They rammed the bioships when their weapons failed. They held the line. Thorn watched from the weight of conscience. They are ready, Sarah said, watching the telemetry. The Ethon are holding the flank. The Scythian shield is at 80%. Good, Thorn said. Initiate the signal. Sir, Sarah hesitated. If we do that, they'll know. They have earned the truth, Thorn said. Thorn opened a channel to Valdor, who was currently in the middle of a debris field, screaming orders. Exarch, Thorn said, pull back, the shield is activating. We are winning, human, Valdor roared. We can kill them all. It's not the scouts I'm worried about, Thorn said. Look at the deep-range sensors. The main body is here. Valdor looked, and he saw it. The shadow that had been light years away was now entering the system. It wasn't a swarm. It was a sea, billions of bioships. A wave of biomass that would wash over them like a tsunami over a sandcastle. "We cannot fight that," Valdor whispered. "No," Thorn said. "We can't fall back behind the shield now." The Ethon fleet retreated. They slipped behind the massive hexagonal panels of the Dyson sphere just as the panels locked into place. The Scythian sun was enclosed. The system went dark to the outside universe. Inside the shell, artificial lights flickered on. The entire Scythian system was now a bottle floating in the dark ocean. Outside, the swarm washed over the shell. They clawed at it. They bombarded it. But the Terran metamaterials held. The swarm, sensing no heat, no food, eventually lost interest. They moved on, flowing around the obstacle like water around a stone. For weeks, the Allies waited in the dark, listening to the scratching on the hull of their universe. When the sensors showed the swarm had passed, the relief was cataclysmic. There was celebration on every world. But in the private council chamber on the weight of conscience, the atmosphere was somber. Valdor Ilara and the Scythian matriarch sat with Thorn. "We survived," Valdor said, pouring a glass of Terran whiskey, a habit he had picked up. "The swarm has moved on toward the galactic core. We are safe." "You are safe," Thorn said quietly, "for now. But there is something you need to know, a truth we kept from you." "More secrets?" Ilara asked. Thorn activated the hologram. It showed the galaxy. It showed the path of the swarm, and then it showed the Terran Union. The Terran Union was not in the galaxy. The map zoomed out, further, to the empty void between galaxies. There, floating in the nothingness, was a massive artificial structure, a ring world the size of a solar system. "We are not from this galaxy," Thorn revealed. "Humanity left the Milky Way 1,000,000 years ago. We ran from the swarm. We built the Ark in the intergalactic void. We survived." "Then why are you here?" Valdor asked, stunned. "Why come back?" "Because we forgot something," Thorn said. He tapped a key. The hologram zoomed in on Earth, or where Earth should have been. It was a dead rock. "We left everyone behind," Thorn said, his voice cracking. "The wealthy, the powerful, the technologically advanced. We built the Ark and we left. We left the poor, the sick, the primitive. We left them to the swarm. We thought they died." Thorn looked at the aliens. "But they didn't. They hid, they burrowed, they survived, and they changed. The swarm, it changes things, it adapts." The hologram showed a new image, a hybrid, part machine, part biology, part void energy. "The swarm isn't just a beast," Thorn said. "It's us. The swarm is what became of the humans we left behind, twisted by eons of evolution and hunger. They are coming back to the galaxy not to eat it, but to find us. They are looking for the ones who abandoned them." The silence in the room was absolute. The horror was total. The monsters were the victims, and the saviors were the guilty. "The weight of conscience," Ilara whispered, realizing the name's true meaning. "It is not a poetic name, it is a confession." "Yes," Thorn said. "We came back to try and stop them. Not by killing them, we can't kill our own kin, but by saving others, by building shields, by trying to atone. We are trying to save you from our sins." Valdor stared at the human. He saw the centuries of guilt etched into Thorn's face. He saw the technological godhood that was really just a desperate attempt to fix a broken past. The alien warlord stood up. He walked over to the window, looking out at the Dyson shell, the massive wall of metal made from his own fleet, protecting the innocent. "You are small," Valdor said. "You are soft, and your ancestors were cowards." Thorn flinched. "But," Valdor continued, turning around, his eyes blazing, "you came back. You stood alone against a fleet to save a people not your own. You dismantled my pride to save my life. You are not the humans who ran." Valdor extended his hand. "The Ethon do not care about where you came from. We care about where you stand, and you stand with us." Ilara stood as well. "The swarm, the twisted ones, they are looking for you. Then they will have to go through the shield first, and behind the shield they will find the Ethon." Thorn looked at them, tears brimming in his eyes. For 1,000,000 years, humanity had been alone with its guilt. Now, in the heart of a caged star, they had found forgiveness. "We have a lot of work to do," Thorn said, wiping his eyes. "The swarm will return, and when they do, we need to be ready to talk to them, to heal them." "Then let us begin," Valdor rumbled. I believe I have some experience in aggressive negotiations. The camera panned out from the meeting, drifting through the corridors of the Weight of Conscience, past the humans and aliens working side by side, out into the vast, enclosed sphere of the Dyson shell. The star in the center burned with a steady, defiant light, a beacon of hope in a galaxy of predators, protected by a wall of melted warships and the unbreakable bond of a new alliance. The human vessel had obliterated a fleet in 10 minutes, but in doing so, it had built a future that would last for eternity. The universe was dark and full of terrors, but here in this quiet corner the light held, and the humans finally were no longer alone.